Hello there, very good evening and welcome to tonight's edition of Recount Watch. It has been already 90 days since Guyanese went to the polls on March 2nd of this year, and we are still awaiting the official declaration of the results of those elections so that the democratically elected government is sworn in, and that government, I think, all Guyanese already recognize, having seen the statements of poll the PPP would have posted, which it received from GCOM, and what is coming out from the recount, that the People's Progressive Party civic government should have been sworn in already. However, issues continue to arise, many of them coming from what I would want to say the desperate coalition cabal, all because they are aware that this recount is exposing the fact that the PPP won the elections and their time in office is up. I have with me in studio, well, I shouldn't say in studio, I keep saying in studio, but I have with me via Zoom this evening, Madam Gail Teixeira. She's a candidate of the People's Progressive Party Civic, and of course, a veteran politician. I'm privileged to have two veterans with me here tonight. I have Joe Hamilton. He's also a candidate, and of course, he's been in this business for a very, very long time. And a newcomer to politics. Well, a newcomer as a candidate, but I doubt whether you're a newcomer to politics, Sanjeev. I have Sanjeev Dattadin, attorney at law. He's also a candidate for the People's Progressive Party Civic. Lady, gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you very much. Good night, everyone.
All right, so as the recount continues, every single day you have new narratives, new excuses, new lies, new misinformation coming from particularly the AP and new AFC, claiming that dead people voting. And every time I raise this issue, I always remember this statement by Amna Ali, that these people got up and went and vote and then they went back to rest. So every day, you have a group of people who claimed by March 4th, the latest, who claimed victory. And Joe, you had said that Mr. Granger got dressed about 4 times to be sworn in based on the elections. But now that we're recounting the votes cast, you're hearing all sorts of excuses. You're hearing so much irregularities as they claim without no evidence, save and except. The only irregularity, the only thing that they're not talking about is Mr. Bingo. So I'm going to start off by giving you a chance to more or less summarize. We are in the 26th day of the recount. More or less summarize your observations since the start of this process and the misinformation, the changing narratives of the AP and new AFC. I'm going to start with you, Gail.
I think everybody is glued to the newspapers, the social media, and the television, particularly when the tabulation is going on. For those who are not in the convention center itself, people are constantly calling and communicating with each other and trying to find out what's going on, the latest. And so people are very engaged in this recount process, although we may not realize it. They're not standing in thousands in front of the convention center. But I don't believe that there's any Guyanese that I have come across, especially since the recount started, that are not trying to find out on an hourly, daily basis what's going on and how soon it will be over. So, I mean, we've gone through, I think what we have to recognize as a PPPC and as a people is that there were many attempts, and there have been many attempts to rob the Guyanese people of their legitimate count of their votes. So that March the 2nd, as we know, was reasonably well organized. It was peaceful. All the observer missions and the GCOM itself, the political parties, including Mr. Granger, said that had it gone well. And as the head of the observer mission for OAS, Mr. Golding, former Prime Minister Golding, said that problem was not on election day. The problem wasn't the elections. The problem was in the process. And as he elegantly put it, he had never seen such a effort to alter but he said such a transparent effort to alter the results of the election. And so that's all common knowledge. I think everyone now is familiar with the attempts on March the 5th, on March the 13th, and the cases that went into court to try to stop the recount. So that we've gone past all those hurdles. And I think to the credit of the People's Progressive Party Civic, but not only the People's Progressive Party Civic, this time round, this election's more than any other one we've ever had in our history. This is now a people's issue, and that the people of Guyana, of all political persuasions, even those who may be in the APNU, are concerned about the recount and concerned that their votes are counted and counted as it should have been since March the 4th and 5th. And so this is a very interesting experience we're having in Guyana, that the PPP has fought alone before 1992, basically almost alone for years against rigged elections. This time round, this is the PPP and other political parties and civil society bodies with international organizations, with the international observers, with other countries. In fact, the party that is now standing alone is the APNU AFC. They're standing all alone in a corner. And so this is what is amazing about what has transpired in this country. And so I think when people feel down, they should and demoralized at how long this is taking. We're in day 89, I think, since the elections. I think people have to recognize to the credit of Guyanese, the credit of the strength of democracy in our country, is that all the efforts to stop this and to swear in Mr. Granger, a man who was not elected by the people, did not succeed. And so whenever this is all done and the recount is done and Irfan is declared the president, this is a victory not only the People's Progressive Party, it's a victory for every Guyanese and all those who have stood in the convention center, all those who have been part of the whole social media operation to bring information to our people and our people to know, and that democracy was not just a PPP issue, it was an issue for all Guyanese. And I think in my summation is not to go back over, Eddie, what some of the details we know, but to try to look in a macro kind of way, the road we've traversed from March the 2nd to now. And I think that, when we look back on it, it's going to be quite an interesting experience for many of the young people to tell their turn about in the future.
Yeah, Sanjeev, you go ahead. I think we're getting some difficulty with your audio there, Sanjeev. Joe, are you in?
Yes, Eddie. I'm falling off from after Gail, and I have always said in this matter, even before elections, that I'm confident that the Guyanese people will not allow PNC to rig elections, because the fight has been about democracy and dictatorship. And that is what everything that is happening and that has happened, that is what this is about. So for people, whilst we count votes, whilst we went out and vote, it's a deeper thing where people want a free and democratic country. And that is the reason why people have made and are making the type of sacrifices. That is the reason why, and Sanjeev would know more than I do, he is at the convention center. So many young professionals, they have laid aside their profession And they have been engaged in this process because of a recognition that their profession is unimportant in a country that is not democratic. And so that is the fundamental fight and battle here. And what is important for this period, even beginning when the no confidence motion was passed, is that this country, we have been able to separate the people who want democracy and people who would settle for dictatorship. And so many of these types who presented themselves to the Guyanese people over the period as people of morality and goodness and righteousness, we have been able to see them for what they are, a set of frauds that they defend every day, the indefensible they attempt to defend. And so it's a good period, as Gail has said, important period for the young people, that they can continue to engage themselves to ensure that this is never attempted again in our country when we have elections going forward. And that is the struggle, that is the fight as we continue from day to day.
Sanjay.
Are you hearing me now?
Yes, you're clear. Clear now.
Yeah. Ed, what happened was a very simple thing. We spent $8 billion plus to put a system in place to train people to print ballots that are equivalent to security features like money. The same is true for the statement to polls, with all the watermarks, with all of that. And it was one man. If you were down at Hatfield Street, which was the Ashman's building, when it was the command center for GCOM, it was one man who decided that he would not do his job and he would not follow the law. Despite a court order from the Chief Justice, he continued to do what he wanted to do. The end result was that we had to, there had to be a recount because we had to reconcile that. It's unfortunate that we have to wait 80, 90 days. We are going now. Today was the first day that we actually got to 3 figures of boxes. 100 boxes were dealt with today. There are 2 more boxes for Region 9 to be completed, I believe, which would leave 10, 6, and 4 to be completed. And then it's a movement forward now where we have just over 600 boxes to be completed. So all things being equal, we should be able to move on. But Ed, you highlighted one thing, that we're dealing with objections that are changing by the day, almost the hour, of persons that are dead, persons that have migrated. I know that the PPP has done a lot of work on the ground to identify those people who APNU are alleging migrated or and voted and those sorts of things. But if we look a little beyond that, what is actually happening is you are turning on your own people. This is the people who are in government have turned on their own people and are saying randomly, if you're at the convention center, you will see, I mean, the former minister, Annette Ferguson, called out 60 names, 60 numbers before she asked, after she'd finished, she said, what box are we doing? And then then it was brought to her attention what box it was. These sorts of things are unfortunate. But the thing about it is this. I know that everyone is saying that these objections are frivolous. We know that these objections don't really hold the weight that they are alleging they do, whether it's to dead people, whether it's to migrants. But they have a way, they have a chance for all of this to be ventilated to the satisfaction of themselves and their followers. That way is for an election petition to be filed. It can't be that GCOM could conduct a hearing to determine this. I mean, if without getting too technical, it's simple. Constitutionally, GCOM doesn't have the authority to do that. But it's if you think about it in commonsensical ways, you could reason it out. How do you file this application? Do you write a letter? Do you do more than that? How does GCOM take evidence? Does somebody take an oath? Do they swear when they give the evidence? Do they write a letter? Do they swear an affidavit? How is that admitted into acceptable evidence? Do the rules of hearsay apply? How do we accept the evidence? What is the legal burden to be met? Is it beyond reasonable doubt, balance of probabilities? These are all things that courts are equipped to deal with and judges are equipped to deal with. And then what about the 80,000 or 90,000 names they say? APNU is saying that they've been, robbed of their vote, then, or they have voted incorrectly. Those people are entitled to representation. How does that representation take place? And then we have to remember the setup of the commission. We're saying that the chairwoman, Justice Claudia Singh, will be the deciding vote, but she doesn't make any decision on her own. What happens because of the divide that there are 3 opposition and 3 government members, and usually her vote is the casting vote, but every decision is 4-3 then. It's not her alone deciding. So how do we go about, who argues for the people whose votes you want to remove? Or how do we arrive at this 90,000 votes? How do we do that? You see, this is why the commission as a tribunal can't conduct this hearing. They can't embark upon it. I mean, as much as they would want, that APNU would want to say these are objections, yes, your objections will be addressed. And yes, your objections can be addressed fairly and adequately, but there must be a system, there must be a mechanism. GCOM is ill-equipped to do that. How are we going to, who's going to be the witness? How are we going to lead evidence? What do we take as evidence? Is it merely someone say so? Are they required to swear an affidavit, write a letter? We could go on about that for ad nauseum. But courts have been dealing with this for centuries. We know how to take evidence. We know what rules are. We know what oaths are. We know how to go about it. So GCOM couldn't do this. GCOM has to do what the law says, which is to make a declaration of the results. And whatever complaint you have about the count, whatever complaint you have about the people, then that will be raised when we get to a court where the system would be. But come back to the original thing that you were raising, Eddie, of why are we seeing so many different things? It's regrettable. It might be an act of desperation. That's my view. It is desperation because what's happening is this. There are several people within APNU AFC who are speaking, and each one of them is raising an equally, in my mind, preposterous position, but they're all raising all these different things. Every day they come up with another list of names, another list of people, and every day, within a day or two, sometimes in less than 24 hours, they are debunked. That they had so many votes in a ballot box. Yesterday we saw Mr. Harman say that, and then you heard the recording, you saw the sheets of whatever. There weren't that many votes in the ballot box. We don't know where he got those numbers from. We don't know how that came about, but hopefully we're going to be done fairly soon. I know both of our guests, Joe and Gail, said that it's experience for the younger generation. I'm not quite entirely the younger generation, but I can tell you, this is experience.
You're younger than Joe and I, so don't worry about it.
This is experience we could have well done without. This is experience we could have well done without. This is not fair. Not fair at all.
No, I think Sanjeev is right. That our country, our people didn't deserve this, and that the masterminds behind those who tried to steal the election from the Guyanese people to disenfranchise them of their right to choose their leaders and their government. Really, it's really a criminal offense. It isn't just a legal issue. It is actually a moral issue, what you would put a country through, put a people through, to deny them the rights. And in fact, it's totally undemocratic, of course. And if it had got through what they'd planned to do on March the 5th and the 13th, and we did not have a recount, of course, we'd be living in a dictatorship. So although a young democracy of only from 1992 to now, in fact, the democratic roots are going deeper in Guyana. They've been able to withstand and this period relatively well. In other countries, it might not have happened that way. So that whatever we've done in terms of building a democratic architecture in our country, even though young and in comparison to other countries, that it has been able to withstand despite what is really a most anti-national and basically treacherous action in terms of the Mingo to try to steal the elections on behalf of the APNO and with the cabal of riggers to make this happen. I don't think they expected that Guyanese would have responded like this. I think again they what do you call, miscalculated. Just like they miscalculated that they'd won the elections.
I can tell you, my alma mater, there was a young student at my alma mater that had written about why it is that in the modern era that whether social media was a good or a bad thing, and it weighs up. And there is one part that was unanimous in various parts of the world, including the Arab world, Africa's, is that when it came to totalitarianism in a government, social media was the most effective tool, because what would happen, and what in fact happened in Guyana on March 5th, was everyone turned their phones on. I was there and they weren't allowing the media in.
Yeah.
So I went outside and I got the journalists from Guyana Standard and the Guyana Critic, who stream on their handheld phones, their devices. And I took those two devices they were on and they were streaming live, and people were seeing that Mingo was standing up in the sky. You could not hear properly what he was saying. They saw all the observers were there. They saw the diplomatic corps, the ABCE countries, their ambassadors and high commissioners were there. And people saw for themselves what happened. Now, everybody can't be there and everybody can't fit there. Those are obvious things. But when you bring the point home to people, where people can actually see what is happening, and that paper that I referred to, written by the young lady, was written a long time before March 5th. It was written a few years ago, but it's applicable. It's applicable because it's the fastest way to get people involved, and it's the fastest way to show people what has happened. Forget about what you write as your status or your post. When you show them video, this is what's going on right now, and it's live streamed to them, then they take note and they see for themselves and they assess it. And why they didn't succeed, maybe if we didn't have social media, maybe if this was like it was in the 1980s or time, maybe that's what would have happened.
Sanjeev, you're correct that you have what we had, rather, and still have, because they still continue, is Mr. Granger and his cabal was trying to rig an election in 2020, attempting to use 1970 and 80 tools. That is the story here. It's like a carpenter still using the hand saw when they have electrical saw. They didn't, and so the point you're raising is that these guys didn't understand Granger and his cabal, the world moved on, and they were attempting that. So this fraud is being live streamed to millions of people. This fraud is on on television, beaming to people. And that created the conditions whereby people were galvanized and mobilized because, as you said rightly, they're seeing this. And for the young people, they're saying, my God, my mother and grandmother told me about this kind of thing. And I never expected that I have to live this. And in the most profound way, it affected people. And that is what have caused people up to this moment to be giving all the necessary sacrifice they're making so that this would not happen. But for Granger, them, after the 5th, they lost. They attempted everything to ensure Granger was sworn in the Saturday by weekend. And once that passed, they were scrambling, and that passed because of the court order. You know, you all went to the court and argued the matter, and there was a court order. And that is what, if that court order and the arguments didn't happen, we would have been having different debates tonight because it was the APNU game plan was to ensure that by weekend, you know, I remember Granger going to Lamad Street there, where they had their headquarters for the elections, and he's telling the supporters, I think the Wednesday or Thursday, that by tomorrow I will be your president. You know, so that is what was happening. And so once the court stopped it and tell Mingo to go back, they recognized then that they had lost that first phase of this activity to have Granger sworn in. And what happened, he sought to inform his people that they lost by the intervention of CARICOM. Granger asking for CARICOM intervention was to have the recount make the declaration on his behalf because he's too proud to concede. That is what transpired. He knew he lost by then after they didn't get through with what they were attempting to do. And so now, everything they're doing, and you dealt earlier, Sanjeev, with all of these objections and whatever, it is something to feed their supporters, to say to them, listen, we could have won, but this is why we lost, because the PPP, in conjunction with GCOM and even some of our agents who were compromised, according to Norton, they together robbed us of this victory. That is, in my view, all this objection is more PR than legal stuff, than going to the court to file a petition. It is somehow finding a way to let their people down easily when by next weekend, all the votes would be counted, and they know that no more they can castigate the PPP's statement of false. They have to now speak to the SORs. We have moved beyond PPP SOPs.
But so interestingly, Joe, Gail, as well as Sanjeev, all three of you would have spoken to the issue of these objections, these frivolous objections, none of them really with any sort of evidence. One, or matter of fact, the two areas that they continuously repeat, the two lies that they continuously repeat, is that a large number of persons who were overseas, and Joe, I heard you saying as a president, they have switched it now from overseas or have migrated to out of the jurisdiction.
Yeah.
And the other one is that the claim of dead people voting. Sanjeev, you identified a case where Annette Ferguson went and just called out some numbers randomly and then realized it's the wrong box she's dealing with. Clearly, she didn't know what she was doing, or
she was unconcerned about which box it was.
Yeah.
Right? So, clearly, and because of what they're doing, all these serial numbers, randomly just call them like that. they are sometimes even getting to their own supporters. They're objecting to their own supporters. They're objecting to relatives of their candidates. They're objecting to people who danced on their stage days before the elections. They're objecting to people who openly supporting them, people who say they voted for them. So what I'll do before we get into examining how frivolous and how fake, if I can use such a term, are some of these objections, I'm going to bring up some videos of persons who they claim are either out of the country or are dead, who confirmed that indeed they voted on March 2nd. They were in Guyana. And of course, some of them reiterate the point that they're not dead. They're still here. So let me get into these videos here. I'm going to start with this gentleman.
I'm from 4 miles, 126 Patara Road, and I voted at 2 miles Friday. Name Tranquilization, living 126 4 miles Patara Road, voted at 2 miles primary school.
Yes.
See? I lived at 126 Patara 4 miles, and I voted at 2 miles primary school, and I'm alive.
All right. So those are some of the videos here. Guys, I have two more. I show those. I want to show the two remaining videos that I have. And these are two very interesting videos. One happens to be the wife of a pastor in Ramadan, I think, Comical. And the other one happens to be the son of a counselor of the APNU AFC in Bartica, if I'm correct. So I'm going to go to those two videos. I'll share those two before we start discussing. This is the wife of a pastor. Her name is Josephine Bascom.
I am Josephine Bascom of Brown Village, and this is my ID number 121232153. I voted on the 2nd of March 2020. And what's the allegation going on? I am alive, I am not dead, or whatever. Please stop that. I voted for myself. Nobody voted for me. Please stop it.
Then we'll go with this one. Good. So, Gail, I know you will take the lead here because, and the young man, the last young man there, I think that's the counselor's son. If I'm not mistaken, this guy operates the Purika Bartica boats, or he's always there. I think I can remember vividly. Days before am I correct, Gail?
Yes, I think so.
Days before the elections, I saw him there and talking. So I'm going to give you a chance to go there.
No, I first of all, for Region 7 in particular, they objected to 23 people as out of the jurisdiction on March the 2nd. majority were from Bartica, and a number of the names they have said that they listed as not being in Bartica on March the 2nd, and therefore saying that these were fake votes, included people who I know are APNU, who voted for APNU on March the 2nd. And so we only got the list this afternoon, so we've been checking, and we've been able to find half of the list so far, including those from the interior, far interior, where we've had Wi-Fi problem because of the weather. So we're quite confident that of the 23 names, we're going to find all 23 names are real, alive, and were in the jurisdiction on March the 2nd. And I know that in Region 5, I heard from my comrade there that I think they had 64 names that were objected to by APNU, and they've been able to verify all of them. And as we have been doing in Region 7, actually having videos and stuff like that. But why is APNU doing all of this? What is the purpose behind this? I mean, can you imagine if the PPP, I think, or any political party were to name people as having been out of the jurisdiction on election day, that they would be a little more careful to not include their own supporters? Because what hurts people is that, I mean, you have people who support the PPP or other parties who are finding them names on this list that APNU put up and are highly offended, as the lady from Muramadong said. You know, I voted for myself. Nobody voted for me. Stop it. And so the issue is that why are they going to all of this? Why would they be taking risks? On the list of 23 for Region 7, there are a number of APNU people who are actually quite active. And we have reached some of them, and they're shocked to know their name is on the list. As I gave the APNU councillor for Bartica, Mr. Garraway, 2 of his children are on the list. One of them we have videoed so far. Why are they doing all of this? And I think the main issue of what they're trying to do is, and I've talked about in other programs, is smoke and mirrors of illusions and confusion and changing the narrative all the time. So first it was dead people, and that Kathy Hughes said they had thousands of death certificates to prove this. Well, the thousands of death certificate, what do they need them for? On the APNU's own list of what they say are 90,000 people, you've only got about 40, at least the data I saw a few days ago was 40 people who they're claiming had died, and we've been able to disprove almost all of those as far as I know. They then went to migrants and people who are overseas, and as Joe said, they've changed the language and talked about out of jurisdiction now. And so we're now dealing with out of jurisdiction when they very well know that the law says you can be out of jurisdiction and return back to where your name is registered and vote. They know that. The purpose of all this is, I believe, to create a whole, to overwhelm GCOM, to overwhelm and to signal to the supporters that they've been robbed, that they're the true winners. To one, first of all, try to justify the fact that they lost to their own supporters, but also to create this impression before they recount. I think that they really would like to find a way to stop the recount, and or if the recount concludes, to be able to say that it's not credible. Sanjeev has given the answer to that, and that is that you go to election petition. Whether APNU is in the mood for that, or whether they have the persona, the morale to be able to say, or morality to be able to say that we lost and therefore we concede defeat. Everything is pointing in the direction that they will try all these manifestations. And as Joe said, there may be some new ones we'll see in the coming week as the countdown goes on, to try to again throw mud constantly and dust in people's eyes to say the whole thing was not credible and therefore we should have to either abort the recount or to have fresh elections, which as we know is just not possible.
Joe.
The thing also, I saw Alexander. You know, he is the chief mastermind of this plot. I am confident about that. And I have said that numberless of times. Even at the instance when the list was being created before elections, and he is very much involved. I would say that he is the one who directs daily the senior officers at GCOM with all the shenanigans and all the things they do from day to day. But I saw him saying that if you don't have anything to hide, you wouldn't have a difficulty with an investigation or something like that. The point is, the PPP, we have said we have nothing to hide. We don't have a difficulty with an investigation, but as Sanjeev has said, the investigation cannot be done by an entity that don't have the authority to do it. That is the Ghana Elections Commission. So that is a fundamental question. Secondly, you would want to think that these are allegations, and now Norton, a couple of days ago, he graduated it to propositions they're making to GCOM about these people's names. And so you have GCOM, they have there the evidence of fraud committed by Mingo. Because when he manipulated the numbers, they had at that time in their possession the statements of polls that proved that his numbers were manipulated. Why they have not taken action even as we speak, 90 days hence. Secondly, let us assume that at that time they didn't want to deal with that. At least for East Bank, you have some 85 boxes that showed manipulation. Why GCOM has not dealt with this matter? That is clear evidence of fraud. This is an allegation we are making. The numbers are there to prove, coming out of the boxes, that he inflated votes for APNU and he took away votes from the PPP. So if GCOM is going to go behind anything that needs to be investigated, is the attempted fraud perpetuated by Mingo. And we know during the period how busy the chairman of the PNC was, Valda Lawrence. And Sanjeev, you remember, she actually was living at GCOM at Ashman Building. I assume she apparently had an office set up there. She and James Bond, the way how she was in and out upstairs and downstairs. Whilst we stayed at the down floor where we were functioning, she was all over the place, upstairs, downstairs, kitchen and coop. And therefore, and to culminate everything, she is signing off on Mingo fraud. So that shows that she was a participant in the attempted fraud. That is the second most senior person in the People's National Congress, Valda Lawrence. So that is where this investigation should be focused. So as I said, all we have done is we went out there during the elections and we presented a program and a plan to the Guyanese people, and they voted for us overwhelmingly in every region across the length and breadth of Guyana. That is what we did. And they failed to do that. And so all of these objections and allegations will not, and they must see by now, it is not changing the numbers in the box. And that is a fundamental thing, that what we're doing is a recount of ballots cast. And the ballots are proving factually and are matching the statements of poll submitted by the People's Progressive Party Civic since the 5th of March to the Guyanese people. And they can't change that. No matter what they do, they can't change the numbers that are coming out of the boxes.
Sanjeev.
You see, one of the things that happened, I know we've moved on, we've gone to a statement of recount, But statement of polls are, there was a narrative at one time that it was our statement of polls or whoever. They're all the statement of polls or GCOM statement of polls. GCOM gives it to everybody who is present in the room. So all the party scrutineers, they receive a copy. It's a duplicate original copy. That's what it's known as in law. And that's what everybody has. Now, when we said they did not match our numbers, I was there in Ashman's building in the ground floor. And we said, what you're calling on the spreadsheets do not match our statement of polls. There was Valda Lawrence, there was Mr. Basil Williams, and there was Mrs. Trotman. Well, I'm not sure she's Mrs. Trotman anymore, but Mrs. Trotman, there were several people from APNU, and they were saying that the numbers that Mr. Mingo were calling on his spreadsheet were matching their numbers on their SOPs, but they wouldn't produce them. And in fact, at the time that they were saying that, they did not have any SOPs with them. They were also looking at the spreadsheet. But they said this matched what they had on their SOPs. They have never shown these SOPs. Mr. Patterson has then come and said that they are keeping the SOPs because it's a matter of strategy. Mr. Norton said it's a matter of strategy, and it's either Mr. Norton or Mr. Harmon or Mr. Patterson who said that the strategy is that if they needed to go to court, they have to have it available so that they could go to court. And as a result, they don't want it to go. But I'll tell you this, Ed, I guarantee you those SOPs will never be produced in court, ever. I guarantee you, because you cannot file an election petition to be declared the loser. And if those SOPs are the SOPs that GCOM gave to all the parties, it will demonstrate that APNU lost. You cannot go to court to be declared the loser. So you will never see those SOPs. Now, what our position is, and of course what is happening now, is that you are going to have to rely, those SOPs are now replaced by the SORs, the recount, the statement of recounts. Once those statement of recounts come in, then all the numbers for all of the regions are going to be changed. They're going to be, whatever declaration is, will have to come from the recount numbers. Now, there is some disquiet because GCOM wants to say that the previous numbers, the previous declaration is not gone until they decide it's gone. But you can't have your cake and eat it. No public body can make what is known as an unreasonable decision. They must act judicially and they must act reasonably. There's a long-standing established case known as Associated Picture Houses and the Wensbury Corporation. It is popularly referred to as Wensbury reasonableness, meaning you can't take a decision that no other tribunal in your position will take. Now, given what has been demonstrated in Region 4, by the declaration made by Mr. Mingo and what his SOPs, what are reflected in the ballot boxes. What is reflected in the ballot boxes match the SOPs that were given to the PPP and published. And those SOPs clearly demonstrate that Mr. Mingo was lying. He made up numbers. Now, he is the one that's guilty of fraud. It makes you wonder, what was Valda witnessing? And what is she attempting to authenticate? And that was in the first declaration he made, which the court struck down. And in the second declaration, it was a PNC member.
Karen Joseph.
Yes, Ms. Joseph, who was from Region 5. What was she authenticating? Now, all of these things were going on at a time when APNU wanted to tell the world and to tell the nation that we have won the election and you should swear in Mr. Granger. And that was the undiluted, undisputed, collective narrative, and by everyone, until the recount commenced. When the recount commenced, it was a different narrative. Dead people, migrated people voted. When all of that didn't gain traction, they said the PPP rigged the election. We didn't run the election, GCOM ran the election. GCOM has produced all of the documentation. They are referring, for example, to poll books. Those are not relevant. The ballots are the only thing that are relevant. And there is a reason why they are making so many objections and ending on frequently. They would make 50, between 40 and 60 objections. Now it's getting to 90s of objections, of which when you look at the pink, which is known as the pink sheet, which they tick off who voted, there are usually 3 out of all those numbers, 3 people who they complained about that migrated that would have voted. But guess what's the problem with that? That pink sheet that has the ticking off of all those who voted, that's not part of what would really be involved in a recount or required to be involved in a recount, and it's not what they would see. So when the box is opened, they pick numbers from the OLE, which is the official list of electors. They are looking at names, and they're taking a 50-50 chance that the name is more a name that would be favorable to the PPP than it would be to them. It's pure, simple racial profiling. Make no mistake about it, that's what it is. And that's what they have done to the people who are even their supporters. And Gail was saying that they're turning on their own people. And that's the reason why, because they would not even bother to look at a name beyond what they believe the name, what race they believe the name is indicative of. They do not go beyond that to say, do we know this person? They don't even contemplate it. So what they would then do is they would say, number 13, number 17, 21, 28, 41, and they go on like that. That's what they do. I mean, if I tell you what they've done, you wouldn't believe. There was a box that had four people on the OLE. They made 6 objections. There were only 4 people. There was one where only 1 man voted in that box. There were, I think it was 11 people there. There was only 1 man who voted. They objected to everybody but that 1 man. I don't know how that happened. And the man didn't vote. These stories, Ed, I tell you, on a daily basis, we laugh, but it is serious about it. It is so funny. There were occasions.
Sajid,
Honestly,
how could you object to everybody else except the man
the
who
1
voted?
man who voted. That's not even the worst situation. They were 4 boxes where on 4 different occasions, I could tell you specifically in relation to one, where they refused to sign the observation report, because the supervisor there who is doing it would not write down 7 of the numbers that they objected to. And the supervisor was slowly and painstakingly explaining that your objections are numbers that are not on the OLE, which means it was 257, 259, 270, 273, and there were only 231 people on the list. So the PPP rep tried to say to them in a calm tone, forget those. And they were very angry. No, we're not forgetting those. Those are the ones that you all did this to. Those are the ones that you all bribed. But they're not on the list. They don't exist. And do you know, at the end of it, after that circular argument went on for 20 minutes or more, the supervisor just said, we will move on. You don't want to sign it, you don't sign it. But these things are to say that it's comical is beyond belief. We had one where a person was making continuous objections in relation to to voting stations in Region 1, and the station was doing Region 5 because Region 1 had been completed and they were there when it was completed. And they kept complaining that the numbers that they were saying the box numbers were incorrect. And after the third one, the supervisor said, "You do know we're not doing Region 1 anymore. We're doing Region 5. They said, "Oh, okay." And they just stopped.
I haven't got into that, Sanjeev. If you
At
look
that
at
point,
the
they don't.
you know,
But I tell you what you realize that this is an issue now. There is no shame. There is no dignity. It is simply that they have managed to persuade themselves that we have to do this. And you're seeing on a daily basis. You just showed a few videos, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. And I cannot understand why in this day and age where information is so easy to check so quickly. I mean, usually sometimes within 24 hours, it's been debunked, and then they find a new list and they find a new set of names. Why would you put yourself into a situation where this is a constant thing? If you look at the media tents, the APNU leaders don't want to go in. The scrutineers don't want to go in. The reps who are auditor, they don't want to go into the.
they usually send Norton because Norton shouts. Norton is under the illusion if you shout, you're right. You know?
He's a
So
bully.
yes.
Norton is a bully. There's
That's
nothing
all.
other description for him. He's
But,
always been a bully.
but what you're saying, Sanji, because we're almost to wrap up, what you're saying, and what I believe personally, is that maybe the agents are told, look, when you go tomorrow, ensure you have 60 serial numbers to object to. So they know serial numbers are usually 321, 322, 156. They just write them down. They don't care whether the list has that number. They don't care whether the people exist. And even to Harmon, I mean, it's you're putting yourself in personal danger. It's dangerous for you as a person when you start believing your lies. And I think that is where they're getting. These guys are lying about what is happening, and they themselves believe the lie. And it's dangerous to you as an individual when you do that because you can't accept the truth after that. Mr. Harmon yesterday claimed that the OLE for box, the wrong OLE was found in box 7003. When you look at the observation report, it clearly states that there was a mix-up in the box. Instead of bringing 7003 out, they brought 7002 out. You know? So the report clearly states they realized it was the wrong box. They sent it back, and there was no other issue. So even to Mr. Harmon, maybe he's preparing the list of serial numbers, and he started believing his own lies, so he believed anything. When one look at, and I think this is important, I saw Demar Waves carry a story today, and I just want to quickly, before I give you a chance to give your closing comments, to present my personal observation. This is my personal observation. I looked at the article where Mr. Harmon is responding somehow to the PPP statement, where we pointed out that only 227 persons voted at polling station 7079, I think it was. And he was holding on, there was 20-something extra votes. There wasn't 20-something extra votes. There were 20-something extra unused ballot papers. So who got the blank ballot papers? Are you going to say that the PPP got those votes from the blank ballot papers which weren't used? The thing is, you had 227 ballots that were used, and I think instead of 130, you had 150 unused ballots. Maybe whoever packing the boxes, tired, maybe mistakenly put an extra 20 ballots or so. But the 20 ballots weren't used. Nobody got votes from it. The man saying that is fraud. I'll give you a chance to give your closing comments.
Eddie, two things quickly. One of the things that crossed my mind, who knows that the agents that go there, the counting agents, they might be paid by PNC, Congress Place, as per serial numbers. So they have to, that's a possibility. So the more serial numbers you call, the more money you'll get. But joke aside, all of these lies and fabrication, what you have now, daily, it's a running line competition. Who could outlie the other one? Because you see, Norton went up there. He said about Bushlot, that was debunked. About 100 more votes was in some box. Nonsense. By the time he left the podium, Cathy Hughes came and she sought to outlie him. She said, you know, you all remember, she said the list was the problem. You all remember that we couldn't get these dead people off because claims and objections only went for 12 days when it was 49 days. So that is what you have. No shame at all with these lies that they peddle daily. And importantly, as I leave, is the point is we continue to say to viewers, you pay attention to the numbers. You pay attention to the recount. All the other things are theatrics and sideshows, and we will deal with them daily. Pay attention to the numbers that are coming out of the ballot boxes, and you recognize that since the 5th of March, when the PPP indicated via their SOPs that we won the elections, that we were the ones who were telling the truth, because the statement of recount are matching our statement of vote.
Gail, your closing comments.
Well, not to repeat some of the things you said before, but that when I was listening to Sanjeev and Joe, was that, you know, we talk about the APNU AFC being desperate. They're really desperate. And I think that they're being reckless and desperate. But I was thinking of, you know, you say that a drowning man grasps at a straw. He grasps at anything to survive. And I think this is like the dying behavior of APNU, except that its intention is one in which they want to, just as they did with the count, that they wanted to stave off the recount, because they know with the recount that will be the end. That once the recount is completed and GCOM is able and expected to obey the Constitution and the law, that the winner of the election, as has been shown in all the recount is going on, that is the People's Progressive Party Civic. And therefore, APNU is doing everything possible to stave off the recount, to be able to confuse their supporters, confuse other people, but mainly their supporters to believe that they have been wronged in some way. For people to believe that the GCOM machinery is controlled by the People's Progressive Party is a joke. The PPP was in government from 1992 up to 2015, and we never controlled the GCOM machinery. GCOM has had, and we went to the Ethnic Relations Commission 2 years ago to do with the hiring practices of GCOM in terms of we're a multi-ethnic society. And yet the GCOM practices do not in any way uphold the Constitution in terms of our diversity and representation of our people. So that it's a joke, and to say that the GCOM machinery was controlled by the PPP. You had 2,339 polling stations. And if we just say APNU and AFC alone had agents at those stations, you're talking about almost 5,000 people. And if you say that there are 6 people per station from GCOM, you're talking about another 10,000 people. So that the lack of credibility, of logicalness, if that's the right word, that is impossible for this to have taken place, because you had almost 20,000 eyes across the country, and within which the majority were not PPP, who were watching the GCOM machinery and working with the GCOM machinery. So I think that this is all an attempt to fool their supporters, rile up their supporters to believe that they've been wrong, because I don't think that they're willing to concede, as Hoyt did eventually. They're not willing to do that. And so, as Sanjeev pointed out, they like playing Russian roulette. They walk into the convention center and it's almost as if throw the dice. What are the numbers we'll choose today? And you rattle them off. Absolutely, when you sit and listen to those observation reports, even the persons who are reading them seem to be tired of repeating, as certain numbers keep repeating over and over again. As I think one of you said, is like they get a list of numbers for that day and they go in and read them. So I think that we have to continue to be vigilant as we get closer down the line. I think the desperation of APNU and the fact that all their smoke and mirrors isn't working because we're able to debunk all the time one creation of theirs after another, that we have to become even more vigilant as we come down the line to February 13th and to the declaration. We have to be extraordinarily vigilant, our people, our supporters, the comrades who are the guardians of democracy, the people like Sanjeev in the center, to make sure that we're not complacent and we're very watchful, because a tiger when it's wounded is very dangerous. And I think Ranger's favorite animal is a jaguar. And I would think that when they're injured, they're most dangerous. And we need to be very, as I said, vigilant. But I believe in the end, we are going to be victorious, and and Irfan Ali will be sworn in as president. We just have had a long road to travel, and it ain't over yet.
Sanjeev, your closing
Eddie, you know, I know GCOM must explain for themselves, but if you look at how elections have been conducted in the past, and if you have any little knowledge about what happens, is they try to put as closely as possible the number of ballots in to match the OLE.
Yeah.
That's kind of what happens in all the regions around. But you got to understand, in places like Region 7 and Region 8, if on the day something you were to have miscounted, something were to happen, you can't get the ballots from Georgetown to get them there and to do it. So I have spoken to two previous chairmen of the Elections Commission, and they have both said that that it is an accepted practice that for such far areas, they send the extras out and they know what has gone out. And usually what happens is one of the polling stations which is considered to be central or the most senior people, not all of them are very, assertive and able to do it. So whoever they determine to be the person most capable, that's the one that will have it. And if it needs to move on the day for any reason, because of spoiled ballots, because of tendered ballots, because of things arising like that, this is the person that would use it. But when a day is finished, that person or whoever it is that's using it, they have to put it in a box so that it could be accounted for. Now, I'm not trying to offer you an explanation. GCOM must do that. But we have to understand, exactly as you emphasized, as long as the ballot has not been used, what harm can anyone claim to have suffered? The PPP has nothing to hide. We have been saying this every day, every time. We should realistically only be recounting Region 4, but you want to recount all because you believe that there are all these things. Nothing to hide, count it. Then every day in the convention center, the litany of objections, the sloth that the APNU agents are engaged in, the delay, wanting to finish at 5:30. 1 minute past 5:30, you can't get a box out of the container. We're trying to finish things in a timely manner. They're trying to hang on to power. But you see, what is the dangerous thing that is happening here is a rigging cabal exists. And this rigging cabal has taken their faithful supporters and leading them down a garden path. These people genuinely believe because their leaders are deceiving them. They wouldn't be doing these things if the leaders did not deceive them as to how the process works, if the leaders did not deceive them that they're being robbed. The European Union ambassador was very clear that Guyana is a very difficult place to rig. I've spoken to one of the electoral missions that were here, that had brought one of the observer missions that had brought an electoral expert. And we were having a couple conversations about it. Guyana is almost a garrison voting district because the distrust has been so deep, because no one trusts anyone. We have put so many things in place that rigging an election is almost impossible. The statement of polls, the ballot sheets, are like money. They're printed with secret marks and etc. on them. So what we have to do, unfortunately, Ed, we have to wake up tomorrow and we will hear a new set of complaints and a new set of legend, because that's what it is, legend and fantasy. We will have to address it so that people are aware that what has been going on. And we will have to be vigilant going forward. There is no doubt, I think no doubt that anyone has any doubt that the PPP won and that Irfan Ali will be the next president. But we have to get through this process and we have to be diligent every day going forward. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to your listeners.
Thank you, Gail. Good night.
God be with you.
All right, thanks very much, guys. And
Thank you
thanks
very
to-
much, everyone, and good night.
Thanks to our
Stay
viewers.
safe.
Take
Thank you.
it.
Stay safe. Stay
Bye.
strong.
Sanjeev, you fell or what?
Take it.